Welcome, Joanna Hoyos. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for joining us today as a guest for Latinos in Clinical Research. It's actually incredible. You have an incredible background. You bring a lot of diversity within yourself. I was reading a little bit of your background, and I saw that you are a global executive and clinical sourcing, strategic alliances, business development, search and evaluation in pharma, biotech, CROs, and nonprofit organizations, corporate strategies, operations, integrated risk and quality management, and so on. Graduated from Harvard, speak four different languages. I mean, you have a Hispanic background, born and raised here. I mean, you have a lot to offer for, especially for diversity. So we would love to hear about your background, your and obviously your path. And please join us and with your absolutely wonderful experience.
Yeah, thank you for that, Monica, and thank you for everyone for having me. My journey has been very broad. So I started off. I went to school for two scientific degrees, so bachelor's and master's degree in the sciences, and then took some fundamental business courses, and then did some finance courses as well. I Science has always been a passion of mine. I started off as a lab bench scientist in the clinical trials, so really leading and managing phase 1 through phase 4 clinical trials. Primarily, my career started at Wyeth Pharmaceuticals, which Pfizer acquired, and then from there, really went into a lot of vaccines, so infectious diseases, and then ventured into preclinical, so developing assays for the clinical team. And then from there, went into project program management and alliance management. So really managing CROs, CMOs, academic institutions that are involved in these clinical trials. That's always been a passion, integrating the science, the strategic partnerships, like doing business with them, as well as focusing on the finance side as well. But the other passion, like you mentioned, DE&I has always been part of my life because I was born by two Colombian parents, originally from Bogota. I was raised in New Jersey and New York, so I've seen a lot throughout my career that usually I've been only the only minority in the conversation, unfortunately. I could still say that I've worked in New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and remotely in Washington, not Washington D.C. rather. I meant to say Washington State. So I've noticed that I've been only the only minority speaking about these topics. Usually it's been white men or white women. I'm usually the youngest one in the conversations in board meetings. So it'd be nice to see more of me and more of men, Hispanic and Latino men in the conversation. So I have had many years of trying to put a voice out there for younger leaders that would eventually be our next generation leaders. So I usually talk to high school and college students about the scientific roles that are out there. And what I mean by that is not only like science roles in becoming a CRA or a clinical trial manager or clinical coordinator, but also other roles besides your doctor, your nurse. There's other roles in the pharmaceutical industry or in the biotech industry. So that's what I've been trying to do. I can name a few organizations that I voluntarily have leadership positions, but I could discuss that too. But I'm involved in different nonprofit organizations. Dan is going to be part of an event that we'll be holding in September. And we're happy to have him. He's going to discuss him and other esteemed panelists are going to discuss their own experiences on DE&I, particularly in clinical trials and translational research. So it's going to be an exciting an event. It's going to be on September 21st, 5 to 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. So if everyone can make it. It's sponsored by CSL and it's hosted by Healthcare Businesswomen Association, which I'm part of.
Oh, that's so wonderful. How did you ended up in research? It was something that you always wanted to do since you were in a university, or I mean, how did you learn about it?
In the science itself, or
No, research, specifically
research.
clinical
So
trials. Yeah.
yeah, so my start in the industry was quite different. So I actually wanted to become a neurosurgeon. So the reason why I was passionate about the sciences was because I wanted to become a doctor. Didn't know which doctor, and then eventually decided oral surgery to help kids with cleft palate problems in less fortunate countries. And then I was in the waiting list for NYU, didn't get in, and then wanted to, obviously utilize my degree in the meantime. So I went into the pharmaceutical industry. I explored that, really enjoyed the research side. Really, by nature, I'm very analytical, very strategic thinker type, and I really liked doing that, pursuing a science, like a research scientist type of role. So managing the clinical trials and really getting a better understanding on what you have to do and also what consists of making a clinical trial um, uh, successful to hopefully have products in market. I'm very fortunate to say with the experiences I had in the biotech and pharma industries and in a CRO, I've been able to understand how quite different clinical trials are, especially for patient selection, if it be for vaccines and if it be gene therapy. So I used to, I forgot to mention that before too. So I used to work in ultra rare disease space, and to find patients, not only just finding them, but also finding diversity for ultra rare disease space is quite different than looking for patients when you're developing vaccines. So that was also eye-opening, to say the least.
And what was the most unexpected thing that happened when you were working on that towards getting more diversity in those clinical trials?
Yeah, I would say selecting sites or being able to find sites in different locations geographically was a challenge. Also, finding patients in different countries a challenge. So, if the depending upon the company size, so there was two biotech companies that I would consider small. So they were either 300 or 500 employees, versus your Pfizer, your Takeda, your what is the other one that I was? Be it Bristol Myers Squibb, Sanofi are quite different in size. They're very large, so they have tons, like thousands of sites that they have in their easy access to reach out to. But for biotech companies, it's quite different. So I would say the difficulty is to select sites and also select the patients that have the disease. If you don't have the right connections, or you do, but you may not have the ability to find them, is the challenge. And educating the other part of to respond to your question would be the PIs, so the doctors, but the marketing approaches is another hurdle.
Okay, so now that you mentioned that part, okay, so that's talking about the sites, and then from the CRO or the sponsor perspective, what will be something that you say that the sponsors are doing towards getting or educating more the population or getting these patients involved in research? Because obviously there's many sites, if they are located in rural areas or in areas that have more diversity, they have that they do that part of the job, but then the sponsor also have to do their part. What have you seen in the sponsor CROs that they have done towards bringing patient diversity?
For market access, they do try their best in selecting different sorts of countries, if it be in Latin America, Asia Pac, and obviously in the US. I think there've always been that interest, and there's always been selections of sites already uh, chosen that they've done in the previous studies. But I would say market access in the sense of ads, webinars, like informational types of approaches have been really key to their success. So having that voice of, what the gap that we're needing to fill for D&I. And also, even within their own organizations, they've been trying to diversify the employment of different ethnic backgrounds. So I think all that has a huge impact when it comes to that.
Okay, and do you think that has been successful for the studies?
I think it has, but I think, and I talked this about with Dan too, that there's a need. There still is a need, and we see the stats. Then I can read some stats that I have actually that I wanted to share with everybody.
Yeah, sure.
There's still a gap, unfortunately. Like, for instance, I saw U.S. Census Bureau stating that in 2021, there was non-Hispanic white representing 60.1% of the U.S. population, and Hispanics and Latinos only represented 18.5%, and Black and African Americans represented only 13.4%. So just by going by those numbers, you have 18.5% of Hispanic Latinos being represented, and whites 60.1%, and Black 13.4%. And according to the FDA 2020 drug trial snapshots, an average of non-Hispanic whites comprised 75% of traditional trial participants, while Hispanic and Latinos comprised only about 11%, and Black and African Americans comprised only about 8% of participants. So just going by stats, I think that's even the approach that I try to do is express the huge gap by showing the actual data that is out there, because if companies can do as much as they can, but I think we as a minority need to speak out, and eventually the word will spread, and eventually the impact and the change will be greater, right? So, and there was like this other, I think there was another one that I saw here. The FDA in 2020 as well stated that 75% of the trial participants, like I mentioned, were white, 11 Hispanic, 8 Black, 6% were Asian. So that was the other ethnic group. So some other ethnic groups are not even mentioned in most of the stats too, which is kind of sad. But that's also something to also consider.
So,
yes.
I'm sorry, Monica.
Please. Sorry, no, go ahead.
So, I have a pretty good understanding why Black people don't like to participate in research, just for the history, Tuskegee and things of that nature. So what do you think is the rationale behind Hispanics not participating in clinical trials?
I think that's a good question. I think the lack of understanding or lack of information that they know or they know about the study, for instance, some people don't even know that it actually exists, the opportunity to be able to participate in a clinical trial, not being well informed about what's going on with the clinical trial or the disease, and also the lack of information that they may be getting in their communities. It depends also where you, unfortunately, if it's a less fortunate community as versus another that are more fortunate financially, they'll have more information available to them. So that's the other thing to consider, economic standpoint as well.
So do you think, because I know there's, I don't know if I would say significant, but there's some negative information coming out about the vaccine and how hard it was pushed. Do you think this will be a hindrance to Hispanic participation in future studies?
There's always been, unfortunately, negative feedback about vaccines in general. I think that that's something that also needs to be addressed, and it's just a matter of educating people more on what the benefits are on vaccines. I think it will hinder the amount of people, if it be Latino or any other ethnic group, to participate in trials. And I think I don't necessarily have a direct answer how we can resolve that, other than saying that informing educationally more in different ways people who are interested in perhaps being part of clinical trials.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also the stigmatization that is around clinical trials or the pharmaceutical company in general
Yep. And that's the other thing too. So there's some states, like even just speaking with the US and anywhere else in the world too, there are certain states and there's certain countries that have more presence in the pharmaceutical and biotech industry just by location. So that's also the other hurdle that some states don't really hear much about it, given that there's not much presence in those industries in particular states or countries.
Yeah, because I was thinking, or the other day was brought to my attention that, for example, people in Miami, which is a highly Hispanic area, is very willing to participate in clinical trials if they understand uh, the background or more about the specific clinical trials. So, I mean, that tells us that also the Hispanics are willing to participate as long as they have more understanding about it.
Mhm.
Chris, Raul, do you guys have questions? Dan?
Hello,
That is
everyone.
coming.
I do. Well, first of all, thank you, all of you, to make this happen. This is my first time being involved in hosting, but being quiet, just processing all the great information. For you, Johanna, I have a curiosity, basically. Looking at your very impressive background, I'm looking at your volunteering aspect of different institutions that you've been volunteer. Can you probably describe when you participate in these volunteer organizations, do you perceive or is kind of related with research somehow, or you spread out a little bit about how the audience can get more involved, informed with research?
Yeah, when it comes to that, so each of the nonprofits, the commonality between all the nonprofits have been minorities, not necessarily only Latinos, Latinas, and Hispanics, but also all other minorities, to be aware of research of STEM careers. So it's not only science; it could be technology, engineering, all different types of careers in that community of careers, to not only empower them and also ensure awareness about these existing careers, but also empower them that there are opportunities for them besides the generic roles. Because I've gotten children and also adults just telling me that they only thought that there was just certain roles they could pursue with a science degree. And you'd be surprised that many people might not even know what a CRA is, what a CRO is, what a CMO is. So there's terminology there that people don't even know that exist, roles that exist in the clinical research. So my responsibility or my goal is to ensure that all the kids, if it be high school, middle school, high school, and universities, know about these types of careers and have a presence in these types of careers, because unfortunately minorities, you don't see them much. Like I mentioned earlier, you don't see them much in the biotech or pharmaceutical industry. And I think we can offer a lot. And not only educationally, but also I think we have a certain charisma in our personality that could also help. So I think all that is very beneficial, and we're bilingual. So I think that's also important, because like with Monica's earlier question, there are not that many doctors that speak Spanish. And I think all the next generation leaders have the ability to actually change that gap and be able to have more doctors be able to understand what they're sharing with documents, clinical documents, etc. I can share actually some names too, if I'm allowed, nonprofits, if I'm able to.
Yes,
Yeah, please.
please.
So one thing, so I graduated from Harvard Extension School. So I am part of the Alumni Association there, and I am part of the New York City chapter and the Latin American chapter. So that's something just to note, that people who are listening to this, if you whatever university that you graduate in, whatever, if it's a college or university, there always will be alumni association. So I would recommend to continue with your university or college and be that voice for minorities. If it be that, or if it be a passion, it doesn't have to necessarily be minority related, but it could be your career, it continue being that minority in that particular passion of your career, because that is a stepping stone to inspire other people like yourself to spread the word. The nonprofits that, like I mentioned before, I am part of Healthcare Business Women Association, was in New York, New Jersey, New England, and Pacific regions. That's particularly more empowering women in science and healthcare industries, if it be pharma, biotech entrepreneurs. We empower them to either pivot their career from the lab bench into more of a business role, or people who graduated or with PhDs and they're having a hard time transitioning out of the academia to the industry, which is a huge challenge as well. This organization helps with that for networking and for educational and networking events. The other nonprofit I would like to also promote is HISPA, is the acronym, HISPA. It's Hispanics Inspiring Students' Performance and Achievement. What they do there, the founder, the whole simple, it's really a simple concept, which is a really incredible. She's grown over the US in multiple states, and it's empowering students and children in general by executives or by success. It doesn't have to be executive level, but any minority, particularly in this case, it's Hispanic, Latino or Latina, that have been successful in their careers to tell their story. That's literally what the whole point of that nonprofit is to tell your story, your career journey. There's people that had very challenging times. There's been stories about people that were raised in the Bronx, in New York, and they had very different lifestyles compared to other people. So, but they still overcame the challenges with drug or alcoholism, and were able to succeed in their executives in their firms. So how they overcame those challenges and how they're successful now. It encourages the students and the kids in general that they are able to grow in their career. The other organization is Fig Factor Foundation. I've mentored girls in this nonprofit to continue and activate their dreams and their passions. So usually they've been either early or mid or to the end of their university or college that they've been going through, and really inspiring them on how to be their best selves as leaders. Another two that I'll just put out there is, which I'm recently communicating with, is ACER, HACR. They are trying to improve also for Hispanics, Latinos, and Latinas to be part of boards. So I know that it's not really relevant to this particular discussion, but another topic that unfortunately there is a gap is the lack of board members that have Hispanics and Latinos in it. So they're trying to do that. There's also We Are Human, a woman who has really made her mission to really have all Hispanics and Latinos in this DE&I conversation about any type of industry, just putting more people that look like us, that are us, in industries, in a wide range of industries. So there is a handful of nonprofits that I just mentioned.
I'm amazed. So many great organizations out there and opportunities for everybody, for women, for men, for Hispanic to grow. And obviously, I'm imagining for different other communities, there will be stuff or organizations available too. And it's wonderful that you're mentioning all of that. Now I'm just like, wow, I'm going to take a look of all of these organizations. Especially the one that caught my attention was the board members, to make it more diverse, which I actually mentioned that in one of my presentations, because I think it's a very, very important part. I mean, if we talk about the pharmaceutical research, it's also important because that put our word there and our presence.
Yeah, one thing, I actually have a stat for that, if I can share that. There's actually 4%, which I was surprised. It's one thing that I forgot to mention. In the evening hours, I write, I author and edit articles for a magazine called Latino Leaders, rather. And I was writing a document particularly about that, about board positions, and there's only 4% of Latinx. That's how they worded it. This was a study for Hedrick and Struggles, it's called. There was a 2020 finding report that they wrote, and they said that only 4%, so this is 2020, 4% of Latinx are actually part of boards. White are 59%, Black are 28%, Asian or Asian American is 9%, and other ethnic groups are 1%. So it gives you a perspective of how, how huge the struggle still is. And that was from 2020 findings. The other one that I could just share quickly was article I was writing about in entrepreneurship. So that's another piece. Latinas, and Hispanics that have their own, and it's very common that Hispanics have their own businesses. If it be either originated from their parents or grandparents, they take over, or they have their own new, companies. That's also a struggle to get capital, to be able to get loans to continue with their businesses. So I found here a stat I wanted to share. So Latinos started 82% of all new companies in America. They opened businesses at 3 times the rate of the national average, and Latina women start businesses at 6 times the national rate. And this was from Latino Community Foundation. That was a stat from them. There's also what was here? Oh, fifth. So this was other stat in regards to the capital issue that I'm talking about. There's 15.1% of Latino entrepreneurs that report that there's a lack of access to capital, which negatively impacts profitability, obviously, and compared to only 8.9% of white-owned businesses. So you can see that we as Latina, Hispanic people, we have a huge impact for the economy in general for the U.S. And there still are gaps there even. And if it be in the sciences, if it be anything other than besides science, there is a huge gap. I'll end by saying that this other stat that I just found, the U.S. Latino market was its own country. It would be the 8th largest economy in the world and the largest Latino market in the world. So that would mean that it would be larger than Brazil and more than the size of Mexico. And that was a stat provided by Latino Donor Collaborative. So it gives you an idea. And then just one thing with the capital stat that I mentioned, that was from Huffman Foundation that provided that stat. So it gives you a huge, an idea of there's still a huge gap and work to be done.
Wow, that's mind-blowing information. I was reading about those statistics. I think it was at the beginning of this year. It was surprising, obviously, but then also I was reading that by 2028, the population that is going to be more like the workforce population of United States is going to be a lot more diverse. So I think even if we want it or not, we're going to be towards that diversity because it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
I think the unfortunate thing is it has happened more because of what's being shown in the news. And I think that's why it's been booming right now. You've been seeing it a lot more since COVID started, and now it's booming. The topic is booming. It's kind of sad to say that it started just because of the situations that occurred during COVID. I think it's always been a discussion, because I can honestly say out of all the pharmaceutical and biotech companies that I worked with, they always had a group. I forgot the acronym, but it's a cultural type of group that they always try to have a diversity in some way in their mission and vision. So they try to have and what I mean by groups, it would be ethnic groups, or it could be also gender groups, so LGBTQ, or but they always had a Latino group or Hispanic group. They always had that as part of their organization. They also had like an Indian group. And so they had all other ethnic backgrounds. Asia also was part of the discussion, to encourage the diversities of everybody, encourage inclusion of everybody in the industry. So, which is nice. I think it's continuing. I think that's something that I've always seen in the industries that I've worked with, which is nice to see. And I think it's getting stronger every year. And especially with COVID, you can see a lot of webinars, like a lot of webinars or even just in-person events that are just talking about DE&I, which is an extremely broad topic, but it's really getting a huge traction, I would say. And like one thing, like I told Dan and the other panelists that we'll have in September 21st, September 28th, and October 5th, we really want to emphasize how we all, as minorities, not only Hispanics and Latinos, but everybody, all their ethnic backgrounds, what are we doing, taking action to make a positive impact in the world in some way. And also showing how diverse we are in our career backgrounds, and not only our ethnic backgrounds, but also our career, and how it's been taking our journey to a different level, right?
Yeah, one thing that we advocate a lot is to educate from grassroots, like the children and recent graduates from high school, because if we start educating them from younger age, we're going to be kind of breaking that stigmatization, and also giving them the knowledge about being a part of this industry that has so much to offer. And talking about that, I wanted to ask you something. You mentioned that you have been in high schools, or in schools, mentioning this. How was the response or the feedback from children when you speak about this?
Yeah, so it's nice, it's encouraging to see that they're they are listening, they're actively listening to the conversation. There are some here and there that you see they're not really paying attention, but the good thing is that they do express interest, they do ask questions, which is, I think, the two priorities when you're young, that you want the children to be listening to you and also asking questions, because that confirms that they're engaged. I do ask usually like what they want to do with their own careers, because some people may not be interested in the sciences, but you do see that people, the key is that they do want to go to college or they want to go to university, because some, unfortunate, depending on what community you're talking to, if it's less fortunate, they don't have much motivation, unfortunately. They see more negative things in the streets. And school may be their only haven that they find. So it's the only opportunity you could speak to give them a little positivity. And in other cases, in other communities, it's just that they're not really interested in the sciences, but they do venture into other areas that they're interested in, if it be math, if it be other careers in other fields. So it's interesting to see that. So they are encouraged. They are listening and being proactive in their own careers. Like, for instance, the girls that I mentored. So the nonprofits, there's some that are domestic. So I've only have mentored US, and then some I'm trying to mentor people outside of the US. So for the Big Factor Foundation, I actually mentored women who are in Mexico. And just by talking to them, they have their own side hustles. There's women there in the group that I mentored that are interested in improving their English. So they obviously learn English in school, but they want to perfect it. They still have a heavy accent. So they're being proactive and taking lessons virtually, or going to the States and getting some classes that way to perfect the English. Some don't have financially the ability to move to the US, but that's one of their dreams that they're working towards, to work in the US, have that American dream. So, and these are women like in their early 20s. So, and then kids in high school or middle school do have interests in different areas, but they just don't know where. So what route to take. So that's where you, as a mentor, like where I would take it upon myself to help them, guide them, and show them what other opportunities are there. like for instance, I have four nephews. They range from 11 to well, actually 11 years is the oldest, and the other one, the youngest, is a month and a half actually right now. And they love science, they love math, they love engineering. So, and that's early to be even having that interest, and they're all engaged. And why? It's because they loved going to school. They love the teachers they have, which is another part of the answer, I would say. The teachers are huge influencers. Obviously, parents are as well. And the people within the children's day-to-day life is also a huge impact and influence to what they eventually want to be. Like one comment that I will make, which I wanted to share earlier, and that was an industry that I actually was very shocked that I got. So later in my career, I did meet executives, C-suite, if it be C-suite or just executive, like VP level, that were Latinas or Latinos. And the first one that I actually met, I actually approached her and said it was just amazing, that it's great to see a Latina as an executive. And she said, unfortunately, there's very few of us, because unfortunately, Latinos, Latinas, and Hispanics think that they're less than other people. And I was just taken aback, because to be honest, I was never raised that way, and I never thought about like Hispanics or Latinos or Latinas being less than anybody. I don't even think any other like anybody should feel that way. I think each ethnicity or whatever color you are, whatever size you are, whatever gender you are, you shouldn't be feeling that you're less than anybody. I was always raised in treating everybody equally, no matter what level you are at, what role you have in the company, and whatever ethnicity you are, whatever gender you are, you shouldn't feel less than anybody. And that's something that I also wanted to emphasize, because at the end of the day, it's not only diversity, but gender, and also the hierarchy that you have to be very gracious and fortunate to have the role that you are, because you influence a lot. It trickles down. Whatever message you portray in your leadership role trickles down to your subordinates and all throughout throughout the whole culture of the company.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, because sometimes I came across to people that were thinking the same as what you just mentioned, that they feel that they are less because they are Hispanic, or they don't even want to mention that. And it surprised me, because I grew up just like you, that I mean, I was never being feeling less, or treat people differently because of their background. And obviously that's sometimes a matter of the communities, or the way they were educated.
Yep.
But that's why it's so important that us being or having the opportunity to influence the different cultures, and offering our backgrounds or experiences, to show them and motivate them that anybody can do, anybody can achieve whatever they like, whatever that brings them joy. Like for example, in my case, I have such a big accent, and a lot of people sometimes hold themselves a little back, because I don't speak well English properly, or I have an accent. I'm not going to be able to achieve that goal. Or I know, there are so many things that we could put as how you say, like a challenge or a limitation, but it's only in our minds.
Yep. That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, and I think we have to break the stereotypes, because unfortunately, I won't really have to say it, but I know, like, for instance, if I were to say to someone that I'm Colombian, unfortunately, there are certain stereotypes that stick out, so to speak, and it's just, in my opinion, quite frankly, it's ignorance. I think people need to be more educated, because what you see in the news, or what you hear about the stereotypes, and it's not only I'm just sharing Colombia because that's where my parents are from, but just in general, my personal experiences, the ignorant responses that I get about, what the country has, in the past, and I'm not going to get into it, but it's just unfortunate. It's just, there's beauty in all countries. I travel a lot. That's one of my hobbies. I would suggest people to travel. I think that's one thing, to be more cultured. And traveling also puts things into, and not things, but just your everyday life into perspective. If it be just the culture, appreciating each of everybody's country's culture, what it offers, the beauty it offers, not focusing on only the negativity of the country, and also the experiences that you get by traveling. I've always told the kids, and also the other people, adults that I've mentored, traveling is very important because you have not only experiences, but you meet different people. And you'll definitely meet all sorts of personalities, very warm people, and people are have pride and are passionate about their ethnicity. And I think by doing that, you are educating yourself on not having those stereotypes, if you will, or
Yeah.
comments about heavy accents or whatever else. You should feel actually unique, that you can speak multiple languages, and that's something that is an advantage from other people, quite frankly, not only in the career that you're in, but also just if you're going to a country and speaking their language, they would be surprised that you actually speak. Like if I were going to China, for instance, and speaking Mandarin, nobody would know that I knew how to speak it. But it's actually, it shows I appreciate the culture, and interested in connecting with people on a different level. And I, like Italy, if it be Italy or Italian, whatever the case may be. But I also, even in the industry, unfortunately, there are silly comments about that, what you get about, for instance, I've gotten comments about, like, you look exotic looking. I don't know why you would say that at work, but like I have Spain blood, and and Portuguese and German and Irish, but nobody knows that. But they pigeonhole you in a particular ethnic group, I guess, and they think that that's what you are, and you're more than that. You shouldn't be just commenting on certain things that you see, what you see.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Traveling definitely expands the horizon of your brain and your acceptance of other different cultures and understanding.
And I think the other piece too is being a triple threat. So not only you have another ethnic background, but also the gender. So your gender, if you're successful. So the triple threat, what I mean by that is, if you're a minority, let's say, a minority, a female, and you're educated, you start getting different responses or different remarks about different things. So it's kind of, you have to know how to be able to respond to that. Again, given to your earlier comment about if it be, like heavy accent, or people telling you about the way that you look, or if what type of, like, what languages you speak and everything, or just by your age too. That's the other one. Ageism is another one. I've also gotten that. So things of that nature, you have to be prepared early on to be able to know how to respond in a polite way. You don't need to be, think that you're better than anybody else. You just, in a polite way, be able to educate the person, and have like a silver lining, so to speak, step on your, like, have a foot on the ground, and be very confident about, that there are certain things that that the other person should not be commenting, or that they should be educating themselves in whatever the comment.
Yeah.
So to
Now
speak.
that you mentioned that, it reminds me of CRA that came to a visit. She is very young. She is part of minority, and she was mentioning that she did a visit to another site, or another, not just one site, but some sites that were a little bit aggressive with her, because she thinks because she's minority, because she's female, and then on top of that, because she's really young, that they think that probably she doesn't know as much as they expect.
Mhm.
And sometimes we just like, I mean, like they say, we just judge the book by the cover.
Yep.
And unfortunately that doesn't let us pass that. And then having a relationship, obviously having a relationship with anybody in the work environment is very important, because at the end of the day you're a team. And more importantly, for a site, having a like a tough or difficult relationship with a monitor is not very good idea.
Yeah. Yeah, it's difficult. Even if the amount of knowledge that you have, even though if you're too young, they'll just see that, like what you were saying about judging the book by its cover. So even if you try your best, it's still going to be an issue. Like I've had that multiple times. That even though you know as much as you want, then they consider you to be too confident, and that you should have like a lower level of confidence. You should dim it down a bit. I was told, just because I knew what I was talking about, and because I was the youngest one in the conversation, you do stick out, unfortunately. And also, I was going to say something else. Also, with the gender piece, there are still a boys' club type of mentality in the boardroom. I faced it not a few years ago, and you could still see it. That's another problem. And being a minority in a white man boy club, too, to be honest, it's quite difficult. You really, as much as you can be polite and also just knowing your stuff and everything, they're still really hard to really break that, right? So that's another, and being minority too. So it's something that when you with those nonprofits I mentioned earlier, they're doing their best to break those barriers and be able to, and even like what you all are doing, you're trying to break barriers and you're trying to make a change so the leaders for our next generation will not have to face what we face. And I think it's something that will be quite a hefty load, but I think it is possible to avoid those obstacles.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you for all that you're doing. Thank you
Uh,
for such an amazing information, for sharing with us your background, and for being a strong woman, for all the hard work that you have been doing for yourself and for the following generations that you're educating. I mean, it's amazing. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. I'm not sure if anybody has more questions.
I
No
don't,
more?
but thank you for
No, Chris.
hosting us.
No.
they're
Yeah,
speechless. Everyone is speechless.
You're speechless. No,
We're just
definitely,
listening.
there's a lot to process, definitely, and all the points that been covered in this meeting have been very energetic, in my opinion. I'm looking in the other side of learning from experts like you know, Johanna, Monica, Chris, and Dan, to expose what is research about. Also, it's not just in our site or clinic environment, but also on the patient's side, that like you guys were discussing, that sometimes in our communities is not even known what is research. And I'm going to put my example myself. I grew up, I won't say my age, I want to not disclose that here, but I never heard about research in my entire life. So now, even with our daughters, they have a glimpse of what is research due to COVID and everything that we kind of talking here. But definitely something that I have learned seeing patients is like research on the patient side is a taboo, is a great area, but also I believe they look research as the last resort, the very last resort. And I think Monica taught me that sometimes can be the first option of, whatever research is being conducted. So definitely what you guys do, even in volunteering, exposing research is fantastic. I'm here a fan, and I'm very blessed to be here. And thank you very much for everyone sharing about your knowledge and also exposing what is research through the CRO, through the site, and obviously patient side. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Johanna and Monica. Great interview. I learned a lot by listening, and one of the reasons why I'm doing the HBA event, and feel free to give a plug again and call to action, but it's to learn, from other people's experiences, because I only have my own experiences to draw upon from, and they're valuable, but so are other people's, and they could be different as well. And feel free to give a plug.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Dan, Raul, Monica, and Chris. I was very happy to be part of this discussion. I think just to add to about the clinical research and the trials and the diversity, I think you all are doing a great initiative here to be able to engage the minorities in the conversations. Trying to educate, like we talked about earlier, is quite important. Educating them, the population, about the importance of clinical research and the diversity and inclusion gap that is quite hefty to be filling. But this is an initiative that I think is going to really fill that gap. So thank you for all your work. The event that is coming up that Dan was referring to is everyone. It's called Everyone Matters. It's going to be focused about DE&I in clinical trials and translational research, how to improve the outcomes of those two areas. We have about 11 speakers. Dan will be one of our moderators, and we will be discussing, our own personal and professional experiences in the industry, the gaps that we see, how everybody's taking action on filling that gap, and really expressing their lessons learned and their personal and professional experiences about this D&I topic. And it's going to be held Wednesday, September 21st will be the main event, 5 to 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And then there's going to be 2 sub-events that follow, which is September 28th, which is also Wednesday, October 5th, which is also Wednesday. Those 2 sub-events will be for networking only. So we'll have breakout rooms, and we'll have opportunities for our audience to interact in an intimate setting with all our speakers, including Dan and everybody else.
I think entrepreneurship is the answer. I mean, if you think about equity, what do you even say in a corporation? Like when you make someone a partner, I'm going to give you equity. Like, doesn't get more pure than that. So we can't wait to learn more and have a part 2 at that point. Johanna, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you all. I'm going to quickly put the registration links. There we go. So it's the main event, sub-events 1 and sub-event 2. One thing to know, which I didn't know earlier, the sub-events are free, so there's no charge. Everybody's welcome. And obviously for all of these events, you can attend all 3 if you want. You can attend 2. But it'll be you'll find when you look at the ads in LinkedIn, I've been promoting it, so you'll see the ads there. It's going to be a very diverse panel, not only ethnically, but also career background. So that's something exciting to also note.
Excellent.
And link in with me. I'm really active there. So even if people, after listening to this, they have their own personal stories that they need advice on, or they just want to, share their own experiences, I'm open to that as well. I usually have one-on-ones or through Zoom or through Meets or whatever platform the person would prefer to communicate. I'm open to that as well. One thing that I will note, I didn't note earlier, I am in the East Coast of the US, usually in Massachusetts, Boston, or New York City, and northern New Jersey, so Hoboken or Fort Lee area. So if anybody is in those areas, I would be more than willing to meet in person as well.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Johanna.
Thank you, Johanna. Thank you, everybody. Like, subscribe, comment, share, and connect. Bye-bye.